The world changed, and no one told us. We have new opportunities and new solutions, but many people simply don't know about the discoveries. So I will be sharing the new science that's so new. It's not in the textbooks, it's not in the classrooms, it's not in the mainstream media, but it's important in our lives. The world of the past that you knew 10 years ago no longer exists. And this is important for this reason. We've never had the opportunity to let that world go, to mourn and release the world of the past. So many people are clinging to the idea of the old world, and they're trying to get that world back, the world of the economy of 5 years ago. That's not possible any longer. The global debt will prevent that. The world of the inexpensive energy, the cheap energy of 10 years ago, that's not possible because we've reached the peak oil. These are just examples. The food and the water that we're now competing for in some parts of the world, the way we're solving the problems in Egypt and Iran and Syria and Israel and the West Bank, all of these things, those are all real-life examples of precisely what we're talking about, unsustainable ways of dealing with everyday life based on science, false assumptions of science, competition, violent competition and separation. So now that those events are right in our face, we have to deal with them. Not force the world back to the way that it used to be, rather to adapt to the new normal that is emerging in healthy, thriving ways so that we can embrace the new opportunities that are happening right now. Resilience, personal resilience, and community resilience is the key, and that is part of the message that I'll be sharing. So where we find ourselves now is there are things happening in the world that science cannot yet explain, yet they still are happening. Quantum physics is becoming the bridge between the ancient wisdom, the spirituality, and the modern science, because quantum physics allows for fields of energy to connect our physical world and us with our physical world, and it allows for phenomenon that traditional physics does not allow for. So the quantum physics is actually becoming a very good bridge when it is honored and used well. We have to respect the parameters of quantum physics.
We all kind of feel that is true, but we don't know how to prove it. Can quantum physics prove that, for instance, we are all connected and we can influence the world outside us?
Quantum physics has proven beyond any reasonable doubt that everything is connected to everything else. This experiment, it was performed in Switzerland, University of Geneva, in July of 1997. 3,400 journalists were in the laboratory watching the experiment because it was so significant. Here is what happened. Atoms that make up our world are made of smaller particles called photons. A photon is a little particle of light. Just think of it that way. So a photon is the stuff this world is made of, okay? Scientists took one photon and they wanted to do an experiment, but they needed two identical photons, so they took one, they cut it in half to make two identical twins. Then they placed the two photons in a special chamber, and from that chamber there was one tube that went 7 miles in this direction, one tube that went 7 miles in this direction, and each photon they fired into the separate tubes. What the scientists found is whatever they did to one photon in one place, the other photon had the same experience even though it was 14 miles away. Well, the phenomenon is called entanglement. It's when two things were once together, then they become physically separate. However, the energy is still connected. There really is no longer a question if the connection exists. The question now is how deep is the connection? How much influence do we have within that connection? How do we use that connection? The human heart is the strongest generator of electricity and magnetism in the human body. And our world is made of electrical and magnetic fields. So when we feel deeply with our heart, we're actually influencing. Now, I don't want to use the word control or manipulate. We're not imposing our will, but we have the ability now to actually interact with the world around us from a distance. And this is the very core of our most cherished and ancient spiritual traditions. For 300 years, science has told the story of separation. It's told us that life is completely random, human life is random, that we're separate from our bodies and powerless to have any effect on healing our bodies, that we're separate from the world around us, that civilization is only 5,000 years old and we are at the pinnacle of sophistication, and that competition is the way to solve our problems. Those are now called false assumptions of science, 6 false assumptions. And the world that we have today is the result of those false assumptions. New discoveries have given us new reasons to change all of those. New discoveries are telling us that life itself, origin of life, it's not random, that human life is not random, that we're deeply connected to our bodies, we're deeply connected to the earth, civilization is cyclic, and nature is based upon cooperation. And if we can embrace those new truths as we solve the greatest crises, the biggest problems that we've ever been asked to face, then we open the door to a beautiful new world based upon sustainable ways of thinking and sustainable ways of living. And that's why I'm excited. When we look at our bodies and what our own science now is beginning to help us understand, it is very similar to what our most cherished and ancient indigenous and spiritual traditions have always said. What science is telling us is this, is that the cells in our bodies that determine our health respond to the chemistry released by the brain. And the chemistry released by the brain is triggered from the feelings in the human heart. What we know is that every moment of every day, there's a conversation between our heart and our brain. It's a two-way conversation. Our heart is sending signals to the brain, and based upon those signals, the brain releases chemistry into the body. When we feel frightened, angry, hate, jealousy, rage, frustration, that sends a very jagged, irregular signal to the brain, and it releases stress chemistry, which is good for a moment, but it's not good 24/7.
Do we see that? Do we see that jagged? Because that's what was
Yes.
another point of view. Like, how do we know it's like this? How do we sense it? Do we film it? Do we register, record it somehow?
The answer is yes to everything that you said. There's an organization called the Institute of Heart Math, HEARTMATH, but it's all one word. They're based in Northern California. I am not their employee, but I have worked closely with them for 20 years now. And they are pioneers in uncovering the deepest mysteries of the human heart in ways that conventional science does not. So conventional science says the heart pumps blood. Well, you can make a machine to do that, but what else does our heart do? So the Institute of Heart Math, to answer your question, has documented this, the information between the heart, and you can actually see the information between the heart and the brain when we feel feelings of well-being, appreciation, gratitude, compassion, care. Then the signal is a very smooth, rhythmic signal to our brain, and our brain says, the world is safe, so I don't need the stress chemistry. So it begins to release the anti-aging hormones in our bodies, and powerful immune response is created within our bodies in the presence of this smooth signal. The connection is called coherence, heart-brain coherence. And optimum coherence now has been measured. It's a very low frequency, 0.10 hertz. That is the language that whales communicate in the oceans. It's a very low frequency. So if we can create the feelings in our hearts, for example, of 0.10 hertz, that is an optimum connection between our heart and our brain, and that begins releasing the healing chemistry from our brain into the cells of our bodies, and this has been documented. It reduces high blood pressure, reduces vascular plaque, reduces the chances for stroke. When we are able to feel those kinds of feelings sustained over long periods of time, the immune system increases. The DHEA level is the precursor to all hormones in the body. Every hormone must have the DHEA. DHEA increases 100% from only 3 minutes of feeling the feelings: appreciation, gratitude, compassion, love, while the stress chemistry decreases 23% in the same time. And all we're doing is having a feeling. Those are the qualities that the body needs to begin to heal itself.